Philippians 4. We finally got out of verse 8 last week, so I know we'll get a little farther. Maybe we're dreaming to finish the chapter, but we'll see if we can finish the chapter this week. All right, before we get into our Bible study today, we're going to open up with a word of prayer. And I'll just go ahead and read a little bit here that we've read the last couple of weeks, but I'll finish up. We didn't even talk about verse 9 last week. We'll talk about verse 9, and then we'll get into this last section, 10 through the end of the chapter. Chris, would you lead us in a word of prayer before we get into our Bible study this morning?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for another first day of the week to come together and worship you and study your word. Dear Heavenly Father, please be with us as we go throughout this service, that we may focus entirely on your word and put aside all of our worldly troubles and do everything that we can to edify one another as we go throughout this service. Dear Heavenly Father, please be with us as we go throughout this morning, that we may do everything that we can to take something from this lesson that we may be able to apply as we go throughout our everyday lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Let's keep that in mind, what Chris just mentioned in his prayer, that we want to take things that we can apply to our own lives. And that's one of the great things about going through these studies. Yes, Paul is dealing with some situations there, but I'm going to tell you that the applications are just as important for us today. We talked about all those things we're supposed to meditate upon, those things that are pure, lovely, and honest and good that we talked about last week. And then verse 9, he finally says, the things which you have learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. Surely Paul is saying, I'm your example? Is that what Paul is saying? It's all about me? What's his point? Those things you've seen and learned and heard and saw in me, you do the same thing as me. It's all about me. Follow me. What's his point? Mainly. What's the underlining point? Dave?
Well, he was obeying the Lord's will, and that's what we should do.
That's the point. Obviously, he's not going to be telling people, you just do it because of me. It's because I'm following the Lord, and that's why you're to let your light shine before men, so they can see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And so the thing is, we are supposed to look at each other. When you go up to some brother or sister and you point out something that they're doing that's wrong, and they say, listen, mind your own business. It is our business to look at one another. Because obviously we want to give it a good example for one another. And of course, Paul wants us to make sure that we abide in those things that are good and right. And so when he talks about this idea, the things that you have learned and the things you received, the things you heard, and the things that you saw, which tells us, what kind of example are you going to set? It's not just the things that you say. What is it? It's the things that you do. All right? You tell people, well, do what I say, don't do what I do. Well, they better harmonize. They better line up. And Paul is showing that consistency that needs to exist in our lives. And so now from that, I'm going to get you guys to go ahead and read. We'll start back with Tony. We'll work our way up. We'll take 2 verses apiece. Let's go down through verse 20. We'll start in verse 10.
But I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again. Though you suddenly did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to me, for I've learned in whatever state I am to be content.
I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in prosperity, and in every circumstance I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me.
Nevertheless, you have done well to share with me my affliction. You yourself also know that at first preaching of the gospel, after I left Macedonia, no church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, but you alone.
For even this alone, what is that?
Thessalonica.
Thessalonica. You sent aid once and again for me, for my necessities. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that abounds to your account.
But I have all in abound. I am full, having received Epaphroditus, the things which were sent from you, an odor of a sweet smell, sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus.
And just one more verse, Betty. Verse 20.
Now to our God and Father, be glory forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, we just finished reading these verses. Do you get an idea of the love that Paul has for the brethren and the love the brethren have for Paul? I mean, that's what you have to appreciate. I mean, speaking from personal experience, from churches that support me, it says a lot to have a rapport with them other than them just sending me a check once a month. And vice versa. I've come to know brethren. I think one of the things I will miss and have missed, there's been a gap in there, I think, of 6 years of my preaching when I was in Toronto, not Toronto, but I was in Jordan, Ontario. That was a self-supporting congregation. Oh, I guess the one in Benton also. But when you're not in a self-supporting congregation, you have other congregations that send you support. And you get to know a lot of people. And when you're in a self-supporting work, of course, you just have that local congregation supporting you. So I'm just saying one of the great benefits, like Paul, that we as preachers sometimes get to experience, and that is building a rapport with other congregations. And who are aware of your every need. I mean, I just had an elder write me this past week and said, hey, I got your report. Listen, anything you need, just let us know, And I can kind of relate to what Paul's talking about here. And I want you guys to learn that when we get to the point where we're self-supporting and we support other people, we need to take a genuine interest in them. I get cards and letters and emails from certain brothers and sisters that are part of the congregations that support me. They get involved, and that means a lot. And what I'm seeing here is Paul saying it means a lot, and also describing the fact that it's understanding that those congregations, I'm serving a need for them. I'm actually helping other congregations. It's not in a selfish way, but I'm saying, I'm supplied a need for them to meet. And that's what he talks about here when he talks about the idea that he's content. It's not like I wanted to be in this situation, but it's good to help you. So let's go back to verse 10. Paul mentions here, he says, but I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again. Which tells you that they've done this time and time again, and he mentions that down in verse 15. He says, though you certainly did care, but you lacked opportunity. What's that mean? You cared, but you lacked opportunity. What's that mean?
They have resources. They didn't have an handful of resources to go out. There wasn't an opportunity, at least with Paul at that time.
That's right. I mean, obviously, you don't have to help Paul if what? Unable, or if Paul doesn't have a need. Right? I mean, obviously, I don't need support from people. I've actually had people call me in the last 9 years working here. I've actually had emails and phone calls from people saying, Chuck, need some more support. Nope, I'm good. So no, it looked like there was going to be an opportunity for them, but there wasn't. So they went somewhere else. Okay. And so that's what he's basically talking about here. He's telling them that at least there was that desire, which is something that churches need to have. Churches have a desire. I was just in a study yesterday talking about the dangers of congregations building up these huge $300,000 bank accounts, not using their funds. when there are needs out there in order to preach the gospel, people that need support, efforts that can be put forth. He mentions here, you certainly did care, but you lacked opportunity. Jane?
There's another side of that picture too, that the congregation has to do. When the group came over here from Northwest, Northwest was contacted by someone who will support you. To see, talk about it, see if it's a friendly separation of what the problem was.
Right, exactly.
Because they didn't want to support you if.
That's right. And that's, you know, if that opened another area that's worth bringing up right now. And that is that they knew Paul. Okay, I think that's important since we're going to be talking about this, and it's good for us as a local church here to know what we could find ourselves in the future, is that if we're going to support somebody, you better know. You better know who they are and what they teach, okay? And do they really have a need? See, Paul talked about, you know, you shouldn't send money when they didn't have a need. You just didn't do that. And it would have been wrong for me to tell people, yeah, you got to use some more money. Just send me some more. Another church, yeah, just send me some more. Would it be easy for a preacher to take advantage of that?
Yes.
Would it be easy for people to abuse it? Has it gone on? I'll tell you, it has. No, I'm saying it has gone on. People taking advantage of that lack of communication that is there, that should be there, that we're finding in this text.
No, we got a job request from this preacher, and I called and talked to him and asked questions or this or that. And he would not tell me how he was being supported or what he was being supported with unless I said, yes, we will support you. And I asked him twice, and he refused it.
Right.
And I told him, I said, you know, I'm sorry, we can't do it.
I get it. And I think that is a responsibility that the local churches have to make sure that the people that they're supporting are genuinely in need. I mean, that, you know, to supply what they need to live on. And he says, but you lack the opportunity. But he says, not that I speak. Now, notice verse 11. Now, this is interesting. He said, not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. Now, remember, that's the problem when you go verse by verse. You got to keep it in its context, what he's about to say. It's not like Paul is saying to preachers out there, look, if you're starving, you need to learn to be content with that. If you got needs, you need to learn to be content with that, because, you know, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And you're talking about abused passage. We're going to get there in just a few moments. I'm just amazed of the people that will quote, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What are the all things? They don't even know. You know, they're throwing stuff in there that has nothing to do with the text. And we'll get there in just a few moments. But he talked about the importance of being content. What happens when you're not content? What happens to your disposition? Anybody know? Well, what was that, DJ?
Goes wild. Everything that don't look good is good.
Could be. And of course, you know, here it is. I want to be content in whatever state I am. Of course, he's talking about there are times, he mentions in his life, there were times when he was full, and there was times when he was hungry. And basically saying there are times when he was hungry, but the Lord eventually, you know, through the providence of God, things were taken care of. But, you know, he wasn't dying. Okay, well, there were times when he was stoned. I'm not talking about that. And that's not what he's talking about. There were times, yes, when we lived on social assistance. We needed, we couldn't afford certain things. It wasn't welfare, but there were times when we needed the government assistance because we fell below a certain income level. That it was called, what's that called? It's called WIC. It was called WIC, Women, Infant, and Children. And it's not like, well, that's beneath me. I'm not going to take that. Listen, we want our kids to eat, okay? And so there are times when you're going to be hungry. And there are times when you're going to be full. But the point that he's making here is, I learned to be content. So what happens, guys, you know this. You can list off a bunch of them. To give you an example, the first thing that can happen, a person can become bitter. You know, if you don't learn contentment, you're going to be bitter towards churches. You're going to be bitter towards brethren. You're going to be hateful. Well, put that on there. Nancy?
But you always want more. If you're
Okay.
full, you think, well, I should have more than that.
So if you're not content, so I guess the opposite, you know, that's right. You're not contented. So you're always wanting. You're never satisfied, I guess is the word. All right. I guess we should be content. Does anything else come to mind if a person isn't content? What does that do to you?
Can be.
Both of you? One of you?
They can become jealous.
Oh, that's true.
And they can become contentious with other people too, because of their jealousy of other people.
It's true. You know, it's a tough pill to swallow when you sit around with a bunch of preachers, and I'm not going to give you specifics, but when you're having a lunch together and I go, how much do you make? Really? Then you'll go home and go, good night. Yeah, it could happen. You know, and I watch myself on that one sometimes, you know. What were you going to say, Stacey?
Jealous.
Jealousy, okay. And that's right, because if you're wanting more, you become, and I guess you can throw in there envious, Bernice? Deceitful, okay. And, you know, especially when you don't want to be content. So you want to get gain, so there'll be other things that you do, which I've seen it. Kayla?
I think if you're so focused on everything that you don't have, you're not that contentment part, then if you go back to verse 8, you're losing all those things. You're not focusing on what's pure, just, good, lovely. You're focusing on all those negatives.
And I'll just sum it up. I was waiting for you to say that word, looking at all the negatives. You know, the person that's not content can't count their blessings, or they don't count their blessings. And so everything is doom and gloom. Rather than being thankful for what you have, you're complaining for what you don't have. And yeah, and that monopolizes all you guys, but what we've been listing here are things that are going to occupy our mind in a negative way. When Kayla just reminded ourselves of verse 8 that Paul just talked about, you know, we're supposed to be thinking about these things, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't let people know about your situation and eventually be taken care of, because they sent to Paul's need, okay? It eventually got taken care of. Gene?
In the business world, you run into a lot of it for a person. If they're kind of bitter or whatnot, they decide what they're worth. And they're getting paid, and they say, well, I'm not going to do any more than that.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head there, Gene, because let's pick on Chuck. Okay, let's pick on Chuck. If I have lunch with a guy who he puts one sermon together a week, has no Bible studies, doesn't do a bulletin, doesn't do TV, doesn't do radio, he's not even teaching a class, he has one sermon a week to prepare for, and you find out he makes twice as much money as me. What's my temptation? What's that?
Ask for more money or just do one thing.
Or just do one thing. Man, if you're going to do that, well, man, why am I killing myself and not getting the recognition when this guy, and everybody thinks he's the greatest guy. By the way, this is hypothetical. Not too hypothetical. But, you know, and yet this guy could be, you know, the greatest guy ever, you know, and in the minds of people. And you're sitting there going, but he doesn't do anything. But the point is, for me, that's the lesson. Okay? For us who are in that situation, is you learn to be content because you learn to be thankful. And you focus on the things that you have been blessed with. James?
That's the same thing in the congregation. I look at Warren and I say, or Warren looks at me. So I look at Warren and I say, you know, Warren's not doing this and I'm doing that. You know, I'm doing more than Warren's doing.
Or vice versa.
But, yeah, that's the reason I tried to get it home.
You tried to put it on yourself, right? Okay. All right. Yeah, you know, like Warren's doing more than you. Okay. It would be easy for any member to have that attitude. What creates this? Yeah, we're talking about over here about the necessities of life that he's talking about. But folks, I'm going to tell you, it can relate to different different, and that's what Gene was bringing up, different aspects of our lives that can create these bad attitudes that create nothing but a rift, but as you guys were mentioned, that can personally affect my work ethic, that can personally affect your work ethic. And so for you and I, this idea of being content, the contentment might even come into areas of abilities. Is there some things that you just can't do, you've tried to do, but you know you can't? There's some people who said, you know what, Chuck, I have tried to lead songs. Seriously, I've tried to lead songs. I have destroyed it. I can't carry a tune. And people were like going, they didn't know what note to sing. I honestly tried, but I can't lead songs. Okay, so you learn to be content with your abilities and what you have. But if you're not content with that, quit, forget it, you know. Hate those people who do have that ability, have that jealousy and whatnot. Okay, let's go on here, what he's dealing with. So, you lacked opportunity. I have learned to be content. But look at verse 12. I know how to be abased. We don't use that word too much. I know how to what? What's another word for that?
Get along.
Get along. Abased. This idea of, even this idea of showing humility. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry. Did you catch that? You guys don't want to pass over these things. These are powerful lessons. He said, I have learned. Which one would you like to learn? Man, I'd like to learn how to be full, thank you. You know, I want to learn how to handle $1 million. I don't want to learn how to handle $100 a week. If I'm going to learn, now he said, you got to learn both. Learn when to be hungry and learn to be full. What do you have to, I think I know what I need to learn when I'm hungry, right? What do you need to learn when you're full?
To share.
Share? What else?
To be thankful that you have
To
it.
be thankful that you have it?
To be content.
To be content?
Not to be overfilled.
Not to be overfilled? There's the danger when you're full, you want to be fuller. The lack of content, as Bernice just mentioned there. And so we're talking about, folks, I don't care what state we are in. Are you learning? Because you have to learn in those states, as he's talking about here. And he says, both to abound and to suffer need. All these things we need to be growing in and learning. And that's how you and I evolve as God's people. And we become more godly. You know, we need to be Christ-like. And that's why we are doing all that we can to possess these qualities that Paul mentions here. And isn't this interesting? Paul's writing the letter to the brethren at Corinth, and he's talking about himself. I thought aren't you trying to help them? Well, hopefully the brethren are reading this and learning how they need to be. Okay? Not taking the brethren for granted. So now let's get to verse 13. He says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Can you show me, or at least think of ways where, I'm looking for the eraser, there it is, it's so dark. How do you think that passage could be abused? Well, somebody might say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What about the area of justifying sin? Whatever, you shouldn't do this. We tell them you're going to be addicted to that. It's an addiction. Those drugs, I can handle. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What? No, Dan?
And a lot of times if a person is already confused about the idea of grace, this becomes one of the go-to passages, saying that I can do all of these things and Christ is going to cover over all of it.
That's exactly right. I can do all things. Those all things have to be things that are good and right in and of themselves. We need to understand that. Is it a sin to be poor?
No.
To be hungry? No, we need to understand that. It's not a sin. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so in those situations, I can remain faithful. And so the all things that he's talking about there are not things that pertain to things that are wrong. We're talking about things that are good and right and pure, getting back to verse 8. And so when it talks about serving God, having that hope of heaven, whatever the situation might be, which in its context, in all fairness, he used verse 13 at the end of that section of 10 through 12, of talking about his needs and the situations that he was in. And you think about, if Paul is saying, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, think about some of the situations Paul has been in. Can you think of something? What were some of the situations?
Shipwreck.
Shipwreck, yeah.
Beaten.
Stone, right? Brethren turned their back on him, didn't they? Who was it? Demas? There was one of there were those that he had mentioned had become an offense to me, or people had just turned their back on Paul. Those who were ashamed of his chains, it was mentioned. Ashamed of his chains, that he was in prison. Paul suffered so much on so many levels. He's the one saying, I can do all things. Well, does that mean getting out of prison? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Look, you might not get that job. You might be poor. You might not get, which is interesting. What do some TV evangelists like to preach? Prosperity preaching, right? If you do trust in the Lord, you will prosper. That's what he's saying. You're not going to have those problems. Look at I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me doesn't mean I can do all things. I can conquer this cancer. You might not. You might not. EJ?
I have a question, a dumb question. Is it where I'm sensing, usually I'm sensing things, accept things that you can change, accept the things that you can't change, and try to know the difference and do not, go for what am I saying? And something that's negative.
Yeah, that is a saying. What is that, guys? I mean, they call that saying something. But when you and I need to, what was that?
Serenity?
What is that?
Serenity?
Yeah, something like that. That talks about having the courage to understand the difference, the things that you can't change, except the things.
It's just the serenity.
Prayer.
A serenity prayer is what that's called. Having the wisdom to know the difference between the two and willing to accept whatever comes up. And you're right, EJ, that's what it's all about. And that gets us back to this idea of contentment and learning that I can do all things through Christ. What I can do through Christ is to handle whatever situation. The all things through Christ doesn't mean all my crises, all those things will disappear. That's not what this verse is telling us, Janet.
And I think you touched on what I was going to say. It's like the cancer thing. It's like he will give me strength to get through it.
Right.
Whatever the outcome is.
Yeah. So I can do the all things through Christ. And those all things are keeping my faith in check. My prayer life is in check. My love for my fellow man in check. My responsibilities as a Christian. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But what about these situations you find yourself in? Well, there's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times. I don't care. Whatever those situations are, you can still do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You don't use this passage, which people like to do, to say it's going to solve those things. It doesn't solve them. We've all experienced heartache here. Every one of us, pretty sure every one of us here has experienced heartache. But you're here. You haven't abandoned the Lord. So you can basically say you're doing all things through Christ who strengthens you. Hopefully we've kept our focus. That's what he's talking. Powerful stuff. Any EJ?
Can that also mean never give up?
Yeah, that's exactly what it means. You don't quit. See, when the opposite of this was things, I can't do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I quit. It's too much. It's too hard. It's too frustrating. It's kind of like that sermon I did a couple of weeks ago, making excuses for sin. Well, I sinned because of the stress that was in my life, or my health problems that I faced, or the pressures from family. There's never an excuse for sin. There's never an excuse for not doing all things through Christ who strengthens us. You can't excuse yourself for that, Mallory.
I think it also teaches you a level of humility that you really can't do anything without him. And that you need to turn it over to him to be able to get through whatever you're going through.
Yeah. You know, the idea of I can do all things through Christ, and again, I come back to Kayla's point that she made earlier. You know, if we lose sight of the things that are pure and holy and lovely and just and good, if we lose sight of that, if we lose sight of Jesus Christ, I'm going to tell you, we will be guilty of having tunnel vision, and all we can see is the problem. That's all we can see. We don't see anything, you know. I understand at the time of getting bad news, it's bad. I understand that. We've all been there. We've all received some really bad news. But once you get over the initial shock, you still remember the big picture. You still don't lose sight of the fact you have a soul that's worth more than this whole world. You have a hope of heaven. You have all the blessings that are found in Christ. You have a spiritual family that can share that difficulty with you. You just, that helps you to continue on.
What you're saying, there's our priorities in life. That's what we're talking about.
That's it. That's it. And that's why we go through Christ, because you and I, our lives are Christ-centered. I mean, I don't care. I mean, in a lot of people's lives, they're sports-centered. They're living for today. Seriously, there are people that they probably got tickets for this, and they've just been looking at those tickets forever. I mean, they can't wait. The big game. And we have big events in our life. People are going to get married. People are going to have a baby. We have a couple that are going to have a baby. Is that a big event? Yes, especially if it's your first, right? But the point is, it's a big event. But our lives are Christ-centered. It's amazing when people pray about the babies, they're praying about how that mom and dad will bring the children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. What? Yeah. Our lives are Christ-centered. And I think that the sooner we understand that, this church that is Christ will be closer. Not, you know, this is the problem with the social gospel. They want to make it a church-centered church. No, you make it a Christ-centered church. You center yourself on Christ, and you've got brothers and sisters who center themselves on Christ. You have that genuine fellowship, that closeness that is there, that you want to spend time with one another. Because obviously, if you want to go to heaven and I want to go to heaven, do you know what that means? We're talking about it, spending eternity with each other. Eternity! If you can't spend 5 minutes, if you can't stand 5 minutes with me, we're talking eternity in heaven. And so, being Christ-centered is what Paul's talking about here, which helps him to get through all these difficulties, which will help you and I, because through Christ, again, what he says, who strengthens me. I'm going to tell you, who needs strengthening? Come on. Aren't you guys already strong? Do you need strengthening? You better. You know, because then you're going to fall. Take heed lest you fall, right? This is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. Put on the whole. What's verse 10? Because it has to do with, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Well, how is Christ going to get me through cancer? How is he going to get me through cancer? Anybody?
Put your trust in him to do what's best for you.
That's all you can do.
And hope for his will.
In the big scheme of things, our goal is heaven. Right? He can strengthen us. If your life isn't Christ-centered, I'm going to tell you straight up, if my life is not Christ-centered, when we talk about the wages and all those things, it all kind of comes into play earlier when Paul talked about being hungry, being cold. If we're not Christ-centered, when you have those crises in your life, you're in serious trouble, Mark.
To live as Christ, to die as gain. So no matter what disease you might be dealing with, whether it's one that's terminal or one that you have to deal with for the remainder of your life, to live as Christ, to die as gain. So Christ is going to help me through this difficult time, but even if I die from this thing, I'm still a winner.
And of course, the knowledge of that takes away all the heartache, right?
No.
No.
But it makes it so that you can bear it. It's not an all loss. And you can live your life in such a way as to encourage others, even when you are stricken. Instead of being bitter and angry about your condition, you can do it gracefully and still teach others through this experience.
It's true. Now, when we say those things, it's so easy to do, isn't it? You're laying on the bed, you're in constant pain, and somebody comes in and says, "So you're such an encouragement to me. Doesn't that make your pain go away?" No. Is it hard to practice some of the stuff we're talking about today? Yes. I mean, we need to understand these principles, folks. When we talk about all these things, if I was in Paul's situation sometimes, if I was shipwrecked and if I was left for dead and if I were stoned, personally speaking, I may have given in my preacher card. Enough. I've had enough. If we don't build our faith and if we're not Christ-centered, there'll come a time in your life where you're going to say, "That's it. That's too much. I'm fed up. I've put up with the church for 25. I'm gone." How sad when you're not Christ-centered.
I learned a lot when I was volunteering with hospice. I mean, you go into a home and there's a guy 45 years old laying there and he's dying. You think before you do anything. You think before you say anything. In other words, big old me go in there and say, "Well, yesterday I got up on my roof and I did this and I did that." You don't do that. In other words, and actually with individuals, that we can do the same thing. Sometimes we don't know what to say to someone, but it's always, they're the ones, and I'd let that person lead the conversation. And I think that's the way we have to treat each other with these problems that we have.
And that's the point. We have them. Or you're going to say something.
No, I always think of what we're talking about is that Christ is the anchor of our faith. You mentioned that. And you mentioned about someone getting sick, cancer. That person becomes aware. For before they may have never considered the fact. Consider this: the person's driving down the road, everything, life is good, they're happy, and all of a sudden the person they're meeting down the road decides they're going to answer the text. And life ends. Never having the opportunity, never having that moment.
Right.
Never had the opportunity been taught the truth. But Christ provides an anchor, a center pin, a benchmark, if you will, that can center our lives. All these other things are on the peripheral.
Yeah.
It's going to happen to each and every one of us. We know this. And Christ gave us those lessons. I was just reading back in Matthew 6.
Yeah.
Don't worry about tomorrow. This day's got enough for you. And I think we need to reflect.
I like that. I like it for a lot of reasons, because when you think of, we even sing a song about this, the Bible talks about it, but when you talk about the boat and you put that anchor that's down here, okay, what's the purpose of the anchor?
Keep you grounded.
So the boat doesn't move? Oh, it moves. If there's a storm up here, it's moving, okay? You're suffering. You might be a little fearful up there, but you're really not moving anywhere because your anchor is sure and steadfast. And that's what it means to be anchored to Christ, because whatever turmoil comes along, you're going to hold fast. And that's the goal, because what Paul's been talking about in this passage are things that are trying to get us to remove ourselves question our faith, weaken our faith, don't lean on our faith. When those hardships come, who thinks about praying? Those who are centered on Christ. When a hardship comes, who thinks about, when you lost your job, who thinks about reading their Bible? Those that are Christ-centered. You see, there's never an excuse to forget Jesus. As a matter of fact, the stronger we get, we understand that that's when we immediately go to him. We don't abandon him. We rely on him. And that's what Paul's talking about here. And look what he says. He says in verse 14, nevertheless, you have done well that you shared in my distress. What's Paul's attitude towards these brethren? Just give me a word of affection. Absolutely, without a doubt, right, Sammy? He absolutely loves his brethren. And the brethren love him. Oh, we're too macho to say such things. You know, I love you, man. You know. No, he really cared. And it's more than just saying, hey, thanks. He's identifying what they're doing. It goes a long way to telling a brother or a sister specifically, thank you for doing this. Acknowledging what you've done for them. Hey, I really appreciated that email. I appreciate the card you sent. I appreciate the dinner you brought over. I really appreciated what you did. I don't want to, you know, you give me something and I say, oh, here's your pan back. Okay. Paul says, you helped me with my distress. He identified it. And you appreciate that. And then he says in 15, now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. Now, was Paul saying, you know, thinking, brethren, nobody would help me out, but you did. Is that what he's saying? Was he being derogatory, spiteful, hateful? No. He just said, listen, back in the beginning, you know, it was just you guys. You guys helped me when I first started, and I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Again, we're getting back to the positives here. By mentioning no others is to stress what they did for me was so important. I just wanted them, you know, he's letting the brethren know that you knew back in the beginning when I was in Macedonia, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning the gospel and receiving, but you only. And see, I want us to see that when we support people, and you guys support me. You pay for my health insurance. You guys have a hand in my support. And so the point is, when you support somebody, you're sharing with them in the gospel. You know, it's a misnomer. Don't ever think that, oh, that's Chuck's TV program. What? Not mine. I mean, if one of you come up and says, Chuck, I'll do a couple of TV programs and I'll type up the transcript and send them to there. Be my guest. That's a lot of work. But the point is it ours? Is it our radio program? Yes or no? Is it my radio program or is it our radio program? Why is it our radio program? Why is it?
We support it.
You're paying for the radio time, supporting me to preach the gospel. We have other men getting on there and talking about it. We've had people help out with the TV in the past. We have people helping out in the present with uploading the TV program. There's a lot of efforts on our website, a lot of things that are going on, a lot of cool things that are going on in spreading the gospel, which we are responsible for doing. But notice how Paul talked about that. He mentions that here. He says, no one shared with me but you concerning the giving and the receiving of the needs that were there. And so I love that unity. I love the closeness that they had, the bond that was there, and that needs to always be present. Mark?
Philippians, one of the first congregations he established when he came across Macedonia. And we got Acts chapter 16, 17, Lydia living together.
Yeah.
So
I think that was on his second journey.
that may be even a tighter relationship.
Sure. You know, you're going to find that when Paul would travel with brethren. I think that came across when we were studying Corinthians. Why Paul was so, surprised and amazed and disappointed, especially the second letter, because he labored with those brethren for over 3 years. Is that, here these false teachers come in and they brag on themselves, and you're quick to follow them. If anybody could have bragged on themselves, I could have, but I didn't. But I will, to show you that, if anybody could brag, I could. You need to see that tone when you read these letters, because yes, they're inspired, but these are real people who had real bonds, a real affections towards one another. We're separated by time and distance, but folks, it's just like you and me today with preaching the gospel. Appreciate your comments, guys. We'll finish up there, Lord willing, next week.